Okay, this video today is going to go through animal and plant cells. It's going to go through the organelles of animal cells and the two different organelles that our plant cells have. So to start off with, we're going to be looking at what is a cell. And cells are considered to be the basic building blocks of life. And these cells go together, and when they're together, that's what makes us as human beings, or makes plants. So we have the two main types of cells that we'll be focusing on today, which are plant and animal cells. And then there's also bacteria, and bacteria are just single cells by themselves. But what we're going to be focusing on is our plant and animal cells, because that's multiple things, multiple cells put together to make a thing. So anything that is living is made up of cells. So our fish, the gum tree down the bottom there, the worm, that's all made up of cells. So the two types that we're going to be looking at are our animal cell and our plant cell. As you can see here, the blue one is the animal cell and the green one is the plant cell. So let's have a look at our animal cell here. And this is our wonderful picture that we've got of an animal cell, and you can see that inside the cell itself there's lots of different stuff that makes it up, and all those things inside it are what we call organelles. And each of those organelles has a different name and they have a different function as well. So let's start with the cell membrane. The cell membrane is just a thin layer that surrounds the outside of the cell. So that keeps one cell separate from the cell that's next to it. But this membrane lets stuff pass in and out of the cell. So if that cell needs more nutrients, then the membrane will let it in. If it doesn't need it, it won't let it in. Pretty cool. So that's around the outside of our cell. The next part is our cytoplasm. So we've got our outside membrane, and inside it, it's kind of like jelly. So the jelly holds all the other organelles inside the cell, so it fills the space, and that's called our cytoplasm. So we can see it inside. It's that slightly blue tinged color inside the cell. The next organelle is our Golgi body, and this is a flattened, layered, sac-like organelle, and in our picture it kind of looks like a whole heap of pancakes next to each other that are all squished up. And what my Golgi body does is it packages what the cell makes. So my cell makes things, not necessarily things that that cell needs. It might be things that other cells need, or it could be making things that the cell itself needs. And those messages come from the nucleus, which we'll cover a bit later. But my Golgi body is what's packaging those messages, the ones that are going to be exported or leaving the cell. And that is the purple and blue striped organelle inside the cell. That's our Golgi body. The next one is our mitochondria. This is a pretty important cell for us, because what my mitochondria does is it converts my stored energy into used energy. So when I eat my food, my energy is still stored. So I have to convert my stored energy into useful energy that I can use every day, that my cells themselves can use. So they can't use my pizza. They have to use the smallest part, and even then they have to break it down to get the energy out of it. In my picture, the mitochondria are the little red ovals, I'd suppose you'd say, and inside them there's a whole heap of lines. So you'll see in the plant cell the slicing of the mitochondria, so you can see the parts inside of it. The nucleus, I like to think of the nucleus as the brain of the cell. The nucleus sends all the messages for what the cell should be doing. So it controls all the functions of the cell, and it contains the genetic information. It contains DNA. So inside that tiny little nucleus is what makes me who I am, and what makes you who you are. So the nucleus is the red dot in the middle, but it is surrounded, and what we can only see in this picture is the nuclear membrane, the outer casing of the nucleus, because inside the DNA most of the time is all stringy and free flowing, so it needs to be contained inside. So that's what my nuclear membrane does. The next two that we're going to look at are vacuoles and lysosomes, because they're pretty similar. What my vacuole does is they're little packages within the cells, and they contain fluids. Some of these little packages are made by the Golgi body when we're wanting to send things out of the cell, and sometimes they are used to keep waste materials. So whenever we make anything, whenever my cells make anything, there's always waste material. So think about if you're cooking dinner, you've got all the stuff that you didn't need. So if you're going to peel your potatoes or peel your carrots, you've still got the waste materials that you didn't need. What they do in a cell is they get packaged inside the vacuole, and then they can get sent outside of the cell. Or what can happen is the lysosome, which is another special type of vacuole, that contains digestive enzymes. And all that means is that it breaks it down inside the cell itself, so it can be recycled within the same cell and used to make other things that the cell could use it for. In our picture, they're a little bit hard to see, but they are the little clear blobbles, and the two that I've pointed to are quite close to mitochondria, but that's not necessarily where they'll be. The next one is a ribosome, and what ribosomes do is they make proteins. So my DNA sends a message, my message comes out of my nucleus and it goes to a ribosome, and the ribosome puts all of those messages together and that makes a protein. And they're pretty cool, ribosomes, they're very important. In our picture, they are the little purple dots, and you can see that there are some little dots around here as well, and these ones here are also considered to be ribosomes. So the purple ones and the orange ones, because I couldn't see any orange ones floating around by themselves. Okay, my next organelle is the endoplasmic reticulum, or what we like to call it for short just ER, and there's two types. There's a smooth ER and a rough ER. My ER, endoplasmic reticulum, is attached to my nuclear membrane. Remember, that was the outside of my cell, and this is another packaging system similar to my Golgi body but a little bit different. And what it does is it carries the information from my nucleus to my Golgi body, so to my ribosomes, where my ribosomes make the proteins. So some of the endoplasmic reticulum has ribosomes attached, and that's what we call rough ER, because it doesn't quite look as pretty and it's a bit bumpy, which is this one over here. And the other type is smooth ER, which is over here. And don't stress too much if you don't remember the difference between the two, but there's something called an endoplasmic reticulum and it's attached to the nucleus. Alright, so that's my animal cell done. The next one is our plant cell. So if we can have a look at our plant cell here, we can see that it has many organelles that look pretty similar to what we were just looking at. So we've got our nucleus, which is the purple one, and inside it is the nucleolus, this bit here, and that's where all the genetic information is kept. The next one is our mitochondria, and you can see all those little wavy bits in there, and that's how we know that it's a mitochondria. You look for those wavy bits inside of an organelle. The next one is our Golgi body, the whole heap of pancakes that were stacked together. We've got our ER, and this one here close to it is a rough ER because we can see those ribosomes attached. And then we've got a smooth ER outside here, and we can see some free-floating ribosomes as well inside the cell, these little blue dots. We have a vacuole, and this vacuole is quite a fair bit bigger than it was in our animal cells, and that's to do with the turgidity of plants. So the more liquid that's in the vacuole, the harder that plant cell will be. The less liquid that's inside the vacuole, the less hard that plant cell will be. So it'll be a bit floppy. We've got our cell membrane, which in this picture is the yellow orangey kind of color that runs around the inside layer here of my cell. We've got our cytoplasm, the jelly substance inside our cell, and these are all the same as what our animal cell had. But what makes our plant cell different from our animal cell? Now, there were two things in this picture that were really different. The first one is chloroplasts, and what chloroplasts do is they do photosynthesis, and all that photosynthesis means is that they make their own energy. So they convert sunlight and water and all kinds of things into their energy. So they need to be able to get the sunlight to be able to do that. And the process of photosynthesis takes place in the organelle called chloroplast. The next one that they had that was different to animal cells was a cell wall. and that's a thick, rigid membrane that surrounds plant cells. So this layer gives these cells its support and structure. So think about a tree and how a tree can stand up nice and tall and how it doesn't flop over or it's not able to bend very much necessarily or anything like that. So the cell walls bond with each other, so one cell wall to another cell wall, and that forms the structure of a plant. So think about us humans having animal cells, and we're a bit squishier than plants. So we don't have a cell wall, but our plant cells do, and that is the dark green around the outside. So the two main differences between our animal cell and our plant cell: the plant cell had the cell wall and the chloroplast, and the animal cell didn't have either of those two. So for next class, you need to be prepared to answer some questions about plant and animal cells, and then we're going to go on to an activity where you're going to be applying your knowledge about plant and animal cells. Good luck.